Back in 2021, the Jacksonville Jaguars selected Trevor Lawrence with the first overall pick. And at that time, many scouts and people in the national media in general, they were hyping up Trevor Lawrence to be the next big thing. But this was a bit different. I know that we hear the word generational talent be used a lot. We hear it right now being used with Abdul Carter and also with Travis Hunter. But when you look at Trevor Lawrence at Clemson, he will go down as one of, if not the best quarterback in that program's history. He was phenomenal every single year that he played. Him and Dabo Swinney, they ran the college scene while he was playing at the college level. And Trevor Lawrence was phenomenal. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they desperately needed a quarterback. They had Blake Bortles for many years, and he was a complete bust. So they go out there with the first overall pick, and they select Trevor Lawrence. They bring in a brand new head coach in Urban Meyer. And Trevor Lawrence's rookie season, well, it was a rookie season from hell. You see, by them going out there and hiring Urban Meyer, he was known to be as one of the best college coaches at that time for The Ohio State University. He was used to running his team like a college team. You come over to the NFL, it's completely different. And for the ones that don't know what I'm talking about, you have a lot of coaches that come over from college. They don't adjust very well to the NFL. I know a lot of people may name Nick Saban, but Nick Saban never really had a true franchise quarterback that he could work with. And he has also come out and he has said that coaching the pros and coaching the collegiate level, it's two different ball games here. But you look at Urban Meyer, from day one, he rubbed everyone the wrong way by setting rules and basically not putting Trevor Lawrence in the right situation. But you have to give him a shot. Trevor Lawrence is in his rookie season with having 12 passing touchdowns to 17 interceptions. He had 3,641 passing yards. That is not good for the quote-unquote generational talent. And the Jacksonville Jaguars would finish dead last in the NFL, and yet they will end up with the first overall pick yet again. Bad coaching played a huge part into why the Jacksonville Jaguars are so terrible in Trevor Lawrence's rookie season, but it was also a talent issue. His best wide receiver was Marvin Jones Jr. He had 832 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns. No disrespect to him. He was not a true number one wide receiver at the time. And their number 2 wide receiver was Laviska Shenault. He dealt with a lot of injuries, and he was not the most polished route runner to throw the football to. And you had Laquan Treadwell, who was a bust at the time coming over from the Minnesota Vikings. He never caught on with the Minnesota Vikings, and he also still had a lot of major dropping issues with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it doesn't help to the fact that Trevor Lawrence was one of the most sacked and one of the most pressured quarterbacks in the NFL at that time. And his best running back was James Robinson. He's no longer in the NFL. He led the team in rushing, 767 rushing yards, and he also had 8 rushing touchdowns. Solid running back, but it's not the best running back to have with a rookie. The entire offense did not make sense. The defense could not go out there and stop the run. They could not stop the pass either, and they fired Urban Meyer before the season ended. He even came out in a press conference and he looked at a reporter and said, "Hey, we have some game plans mixed in for the Los Angeles Rams." The reporter asked him, "What about Aaron Donald?" He did not even know who Aaron Donald was at that time. One of the best defensive players the NFL has seen in the last 10 to 15 years. And you as a head coach, you did not know who he was. And after the Jacksonville Jaguars got blown out on a Thursday night football game, they caught Urban Meyer in a bar just a couple of hours later. He was not ready to be an NFL head coach, and he was an older gentleman at the time in terms of going out there and getting the job because he had the college experience. He should have never been hired in the first place. But the Jaguars came out, their ownership, they went out there and they made a major decision. By firing Urban Meyer, they went out there and they hired Doug Peterson. And year number 2, it was a better year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. You would go out there, you select Trayvon Walker with the first overall pick. And I do have my gripes with this pick. They should have went with Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson was a better player coming out of Michigan, statistically, and just looking at on the film also. But Trayvon Walker had that upside, elite run stopper at Georgia, but he was not known to go back there and bring the quarterback down consistently. Trayvon Walker is not a bad football player, but to take him with the first overall pick was a head scratcher while Aiden Hutchinson is there on the board. And we could talk about scheme fit, that Trayvon Walker at the time was a better scheme fit than Aiden Hutchinson. We've seen Aiden Hutchinson go back in coverage, cover wide receivers, not in a huge dosage, but they use him similar to how the Steelers use TJ Watt. He's mainly going to be your pass rusher, yes, but Aiden Hutchinson can fit into any system in the NFL. So selecting Trayvon Walker over him is still a head scratcher right now in 2025. But when you look at the roster that the Jacksonville Jaguars had in 2022, they made a lot of moves, from bringing in Doug Peterson, him bringing over Press Taylor to being the offensive coordinator. You also saw the debut of Travis Etienne. They selected him in the first round with Trevor Lawrence. He missed all of his rookie season dealing with a foot injury. So technically his sophomore year in the NFL was his rookie season. We saw Etienne go out there and put up impressive numbers. He had 1,125 rushing yards on the season, 5 rushing touchdowns, and he had 316 receiving yards. But they brought in some big names at the wide receiving position. Well, big names for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They brought in Zay Jones, and they also brought in Christian Kirk. Now, they gave Christian Kirk a lot of money to come over from the Arizona Cardinals. The problem was this: they paid him like a number 1 wide receiver. Compared to what wide receivers are getting paid today, it's not a crazy contract. But at that time, it was crazy for a player like Christian Kirk, who was never viewed as a true number 1, even with the Arizona Cardinals. But Christian Kirk would go out there and have one of the best seasons of his career up to this point. He had 1,108 receiving yards, 8 receiving touchdowns. Zay Jones, who was massive in terms of being a deep threat, and especially on third downs with Trevor Lawrence, he had 82 catches for 823 receiving yards, 5 receiving touchdowns. So we saw a brand new offense be implemented by Doug Peterson, and we saw Trevor Lawrence flourish because of this, due to the fact they brought in so many weapons on the outside, and they brought in a veteran presence on the offensive line with Brandon Scherf at the guard position. We'll see Trevor Lawrence not deal with as much pressure, and we will see him actually go out there and look like the first overall pick. He had 4,113 passing yards, 25 passing touchdowns to 8 interceptions, but he also had 5 rushing touchdowns. Trevor Lawrence had solid mobility at Clemson, but he was never just dual threat type of quarterback. In the red zone area, we will see Trevor Lawrence in year number 2 take off with the football, fight for extra yardage, and just create more plays behind the line of scrimmage. We saw him come out with more confidence, and we saw Doug Peterson raise him up to the next level. The Jacksonville Jaguars would play so good, they would go out there, win their division. Not only that, they will win a playoff game over the Los Angeles Chargers, the only playoff game that Trevor Lawrence has won so far in his career. And I know you can make the case that his career right now is in better standing than Justin Herbert, because Justin Herbert has not won a playoff game, and the same with Kyler Murray. But what they did in that playoff game is pretty crazy. They were down huge in that matchup. It was a collapse by the Los Angeles Chargers. Give the Jacksonville Jaguars a lot of credit to come back in that matchup and to basically zone out in the second half and go crazy. Trevor Lawrence had 4 interceptions in that matchup. He comes back out and he balls out. Looked phenomenal in the second half, and their defense also stepped up. They would go out there the next week and run to the Kansas City Chiefs, and just a couple plays kept them away from advancing and making a deeper playoff run. It came down to 2 drop passes by Christian Kirk going deep down the field. But hey, season number 2, to go out there and make the NFL playoffs, to win a playoff game with Trevor Lawrence, you have to be in great standing, right? Except that was not the case. We will see Trevor Lawrence enter year 3 with all that confidence, all the playing mobility that he developed last season. He enters year number 3. They start off red hot. They were the number 1 seed in the AFC until Trevor Lawrence suffered an ankle injury against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, we have to put in context here. They were the number 1 seed at the time, but their offense has stagnated. They were not the same on the offensive end, but Trevor Lawrence was still playing very well. Etienne had a solid year still up to that point. What they ran into is the fact that Press Taylor, his offensive play calls were stale, and Doug Peterson was comfortable with those plays. As soon as Trevor Lawrence went down with that ankle injury, he would not have the same mobility, and he could not step up in the pocket as much as he was doing the year before in his sophomore season. So year number 3, they're in the playoff hunt. Down the stretch, they lost out. You guys know what happened. The Houston Texans had just drafted CJ at the quarterback position. They go out there, they make the NFL playoffs, they win the division. But Trevor Lawrence had 21 passing touchdowns to 14 interceptions, 4,016 passing yards. At that point in time, it was time to move on from Press Taylor. It was time to move on from your defensive coordinator. Doug Peterson opted to move on from the defensive coordinator, but he kept Press Taylor. Press Taylor was a terrible GM. A terrible offensive coordinator, I cannot stress this enough about how bad of a coordinator he was on the back half of that season. And I know that Trevor Lawrence was dealing with the ankle injury. They had so many injuries with their roster, with Christian Kirk going down. You look at their defense, they were dealing with injuries, but that offense should have not been that bad with Trevor Lawrence still being out there and playing games. But you can use that as an excuse. Then we come up to this last season. The last season with the Jacksonville Jaguars, they were not in a good situation. Trevor Lawrence suffered a brutal concussion against Azeez Al-Shaair. Say what you want to say about this play. I think it's one of the most dirtiest plays of the season. He's going down. He's sliding against the Houston Texans. You could say that he slid late, but Azeez Al-Shaair could have still pulled up. He hits him anyway. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, they go out there, they start a fight. They're upset with the Houston Texans. So Trevor Lawrence is dealing with that. He already had a lingering shoulder issue just a couple weeks before. Just a couple of weeks later, he gets knocked out for the rest of the season because of that shoulder injury. So it begs the question, did Trevor Lawrence just have one great year? And even some will even say that second year wasn't even great. For his standards and for the Jacksonville Jaguars, that's a great year. We're talking about a young quarterback in one of the worst franchises in the NFL. And I want a lot of people to also understand this. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they don't have the cachet with other franchises like the Green Bay Packers, the Steelers, and the Dallas Cowboys. They became an expansion franchise in 1995 with the Carolina Panthers, so they don't have the tenure as some of those other teams in the NFL. So their bad years right now, you could say they're one of the worst ran franchises in the NFL because of the Khan family, and that would be true. But I look at Trevor Lawrence like this. He has to step up eventually for the Jacksonville Jaguars. You're giving him yet another head coach and Liam Cohen, who is coming over from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He helped Baker Mayfield look like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL from the previous season. Granted, Baker Mayfield has two of the best weapons that you can have right now in Chris Godwin and also in Mike Evans. And he gave Baker Mayfield a great run game, something the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have not had since Ryan Jensen went down with his ACL injury. But a lot of that was also because of personnel. The offense to run with Trevor Lawrence is pretty simple. You have a star wide receiver in Brian Thomas Jr., who's selected in last year's draft class. He was the one bright spot with the Jacksonville Jaguars this previous season. He is the definition of a true number one. Brian Thomas Jr. had 1,282 passing yards. That was the third most in the NFL on 87 catches. That was tied for the 16th most in the NFL. And he had 10 receiving touchdowns. He averaged 15 yards a catch. He's a bona fide true number one. So if you never saw Christian Kirk as being a true number one wide receiver, and I never did, I think the system really helped him out in that first year with Doug Peterson and with Trevor Lawrence. And they moved off of Christian Kirk. They just traded him to the Houston Texans. But Brian Thomas Jr., you build your wide receiving core around him and you get him the football as much as possible. And he put up numbers like that playing with Trevor Lawrence and also playing with Mac Jones. And no disrespect to Mac Jones. He's a solid backup at best. That's what he is. So to see him go out there and put up the numbers like this, it's pretty impressive, especially for a rookie. Then you also went out there and you signed Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis had some major drops this season, especially in the red zone. Him and Christian Kirk, when they were both fully healthy. And this is also something else that doesn't get talked about enough with Trevor Lawrence. Since he was drafted in 2021, the Jacksonville Jaguars have had a lot of drops with their wide receivers and with their tight ends. That's also something else to look at. The wide receivers have to do a better job of catching the football. I look at Gabe Davis. He is overpaid in my opinion, but he's a solid number two. He only had 239 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns this previous year. He averaged 12 yards a catch. Do not be surprised if the Jacksonville Jaguars select a wide receiver in the mid to late rounds to possibly develop behind Gabe Davis or even Brian Thomas Jr. so they could eventually be the number 2 or number 3 wide receiver around the rest of your talent. But you know what you have with Brian Thomas Jr. You did sign Dyami Brown. He's coming over from the Washington Commanders. He's a solid deep threat. That's what he is. He averaged 10 yards a catch, only had 308 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown. Parker Washington did come on strong in the back half of the season. 390 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns. But it depends on the type of wide receivers that Liam Cohen wants to bring in. They also went out there and they released Evan Ingram. He is now part of the Denver Broncos. Evan Ingram is part of that free agency class a couple of years ago that I talked about when they brought in Brandon Scherf, when they brought in Christian Kirk. He completely turned his career around with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I wish that he was still on the roster right now. He's one of the most talented tight ends you can have. The problem is with Evan Ingram, he's dealt with so many injuries. And this is a type of luck that the Jaguars have ran into. Before they played the Cleveland Browns, he gets injured warming up. You can't make this up. He's scratching and he gets injured. So he can't play before the game. And even though Doug Peterson was a bad head coach towards the end of his tenure with the Jaguars, and the same with Press Taylor being the offensive coordinator, you revolve your game plan around a tight end or your top wide receiver and they go out just minutes before game time. It's only so much that you can do. Even if you are one of the best head coaches in the NFL, that is tough. And they lost against the Cleveland Browns, not because of Trevor Lawrence. If you go back and watch that game, it was an illegal shift. Trevor Lawrence halves them right in the red zone. Illegal shift, pushes them back. Another penalty, pushes them back, and it was a major drop in the red zone. Just a lot of bad luck with Trevor Lawrence. And I'm not trying to come on here and make excuses for Trevor, because the turnovers, they are ridiculous. Besides that one season in the NFL in year number 2 of his career, he's had a high turnover rate. 12 passing touchdowns and 17 interceptions his rookie season. 21 passing touchdowns and 14 interceptions his third year in the NFL. 11 passing touchdowns and 7 interceptions this previous year. He has to do a better job of throwing the football to his teammates and not throwing it to the other team. He has to clean up on the intermediate routes. That's where a lot of the interceptions are happening. 15 and 20 yards out. The deep ball is there. The chemistry is already there with Brian Thomas Jr. and the same with Christian Kirk when he was on this roster. It's just the middle routes that are really hurting him right now. He'll hit the check down. The pocket awareness is solid for a quarterback his age. But look at that contract extension that they gave Trevor Lawrence. Right now, he's not worth that contract extension. And I know the Jaguars, you're whether go out there and keep the guy that you drafted, but to give him $275 million for 5 years is crazy to me, because he's only had one great season. So I look at that contract extension right now, I'm still scratching my head. But I do believe the future will be bright with the Jaguars. They just have to bring in the right personnel with Liam Cohen. Do I see them making the NFL playoffs for this upcoming season? Right now, I would say no, because the Houston Texans, their defense is one of the best defenses in the NFL. They have the best quarterback in this division over the last 2 years. And this is coming from a Trevor Lawrence fan. The only concern with the Houston Texans are their wide receivers, the health of them, and also their offensive line. They just had those concerns last season. They made the NFL playoffs. The Jaguars, they're better than the Tennessee Titans right now as I record this video. They have not selected Cam Ward with the first overall pick just yet. And I look at the Indianapolis Colts. No offense, Colts fans. You have Anthony Richardson. You have Daniel Jones as your number 1 and number 2 quarterback. I'm taking Trevor Lawrence on his worst day over both of those quarterbacks. So right now, I would say the Jaguars are the second best team in this division. But it really sucks. That second year with Trevor Lawrence, they should have been able to dominate this division up to this point. But that's how fast sports change. But especially this is how fast the NFL changes. No one saw the Houston Texans going out there after they traded Deshaun Watson and basically landing a top quarterback in CJ with a top head coach in DeMeco Ryans. And there was so much controversy with Trent Baalke as the general manager because he made the pick to go out there and select Trayvon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson. Many coaches reportedly, they did not want to work with Trent Baalke. I believe that is true. Liam Cohen was out on this job. He wanted to go back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They go out there, they fire Trent Baalke. The next thing you know, Liam Cohen, you know what? I'll sign. I'll come back. Let's talk the money. They gave him his contract. And he said, you know what? I'm here. It's going to be up to him and to Trevor Lawrence to fully turn his team around. But the state of the Jaguars right now, they're in bad shape because they're still devoid of talent in certain positions on the offensive line. They need help. I like Anton Harrison. He's a young player. Walker Little at the left tackle position. So your tackle positions, they're young. Let them fully develop. You need to bring in some interior help. I know they have Ezra Cleveland there at the left guard position. He's 26 years old, but they need to bring in some more interior offensive line help for Trevor Lawrence. You do have a running back controversy right now. Travis Etienne is not your best running back anymore. Your best running back is Tank Bigsby. He ran harder in between the tackles, and he was just overall a better running back. He has 766 rushing yards on the season, seven rushing touchdowns. Travis Etienne, on the other hand, he had 558 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. He averaged 3.7 yards a carry. Tank Bigsby averaged 4.6 yards a carry. He has more juice coming out of the backfield. The wide receiving core, I think you're solid. You can bring in another wide receiver to help push you over the top. And as far as that tight end position, you do have Brenton Strange. I could see them possibly drafting a tight end, but Brenton Strange did have 411 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. He's only 24 years old. We'll see what he has. But this is a deep tight end class also. So expect for the Jacksonville Jaguars to select a defensive lineman like a Mason Graham or a cornerback in the first round, and the second and third round, expect for them to go offense. And speaking of defensive talent, Josh Allen had a down year this previous year. He had a monster year a year ago when they gave him that contract extension. Remember, they franchise tagged him. He only had 8 sacks on the season, 1 forced fumble. And your defense over the last 2 years, they have regressed underneath Doug Peterson, which is also another reason why they fired him. Trayvon Walker, 10.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, but the pressure rate was not consistent with these two. When you have 2 young athletic players like this that can stop the run, they're quick against offensive tackles. Why can they not go back there and bring down the quarterback, move them around? The one thing I credit the Steelers on, they'll move around TJ Watt. They'll move around Alex Highsmith. We've seen this with Trey Henderson in the Cincinnati Bengals. They'll move him around. You did not see many adjustments by the defensive coordinator. That's why they're bringing in a brand new defensive coach and a brand new head coach. But Mason Graham, he would fit the Jacksonville Jaguars very well. Just a big, powerful defensive tackle that can go out there, bring the quarterback down, and can stop the run. And that's the number one thing right now with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I will say this about every team in the NFL. We just saw this with the Eagles, what they did against Patrick Mahomes and that offensive line. If you have a great defensive front seven that can consistently go back there and put pressure on the quarterback, it's going to make life easier for everyone else in the secondary. It will make an okay secondary look very good. It'll make a good secondary look great because it starts up front in the trenches. Go with a big defensive tackle. I know they did this a couple of years ago. They went with Taven Bryan. He did not work out. Mason Graham is different. He's a definition of a man that can eat up double teams and free up spacing on the outside for players like Trayvon Walker, and the same with Josh Allen. And you look at this division, the Houston Texans, what did I just say? Their offensive line is a major question mark. You look at the Indianapolis Colts. They run the football at an elite level with Jonathan Taylor. They want to run the football with Anthony Richardson also. Look at the Tennessee Titans. They have 2 very good running backs, Tajay Spears, Tony Pollard. Go out there and get physical up front. I think at the linebacker position, you're solid. I like Devin Lloyd a lot. Solid linebacker. He's one of the most slept on linebackers in the NFL. Your secondary, you do need some help. Tyson Campbell, you gave him a contract extension. Tyson Campbell, solid when he's on the field. Can he stay healthy for an entire season? So far, over the last 2 years, he has been able to. Tyson Campbell was in the same conversation his rookie season as being a top young cornerback. Since then, he's fizzled out a little bit because of his availability and lack thereof. You did bring in Jordan Lewis. He's one of the best nickel cornerbacks that you could have. He's going to be solid on the inside playing your nickel corner. Safety, you could bring in some help there. You do have Darnell Savage. We'll see if he can work out there. But the Jacksonville Jaguars, they have to do a better job building talent around Trevor Lawrence. That's what it comes down to. And Trevor Lawrence has to do a better job also. This is a situation to where the Jaguars have failed him a lot. And at the same time, he has to come up big with the Jaguars also. I think that Trevor Lawrence was very overhyped coming out of college because you look at him so far. You look at CJ. He's made the playoffs back-to-back years. He won playoff games back-to-back years. They defeated the Cleveland Browns. They go out there, they defeat the Los Angeles Chargers. You only have 1 playoff appearance and 1 playoff win with Trevor Lawrence up to this point. He is a young player. Give him time. I know that we look at players like CJ and Jaden Daniels, and it is unfair for me to compare Trevor Lawrence to CJ, but at the same time, with the hype the media gave him, you're just expecting more. And with the talent that he has, Trevor Lawrence is the ideal fit, and he's the ideal body type to have at the quarterback position. Big, strong, athletic, can make any throw. It's time for him to step up in the AFC. I want to see some different teams in the mix in the AFC. I'm happy to see the Houston Texans there. I was happy to see the Los Angeles Chargers, the Jaguars there a couple of years ago. I want to see them back in the hunt, especially this team. You look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They've won their division back-to-back years with Baker Mayfield. I'm not saying you have to go out there and only lose 2 games a season or 3 games a season. Losses are going to happen. Interceptions are going to happen, and the same with fumbles. But can Trevor Lawrence overcome that adversity? And so far, he hasn't. But the Jaguars will be better off with their brand new general manager and Liam Cohen. And hopefully the Khan family can actually go out there and help out Trevor Lawrence and the rest of this roster. But let me know in the comment section below how you feel about Trevor Lawrence so far in his career. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Most importantly, want each and every last one of you guys stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for the video, guys. God bless.